Hey guys, welcome back to Sleeping Stone Whispers. Today, we're going to slowly step into the quiet, unhurried lives of wealthy families when nothing at all was scheduled. From sunlit parlors to empty gardens, from the gentle shuffle of slippers across marble floors to the soft drip of fountains, every tiny, ordinary moment is stretched out in the calmest detail. You'll hear about tea steeping, letters that never arrive, portraits silently watching over empty halls, and shadows moving slowly through velvet rooms, all perfect for letting your mind relax, your eyelids grow heavy, and your body drift gently toward sleep. If you're ready to spend hours wandering through peaceful routines and calm, repetitive rhythms, stay with us, give this video a like, and subscribe to Sleeping Stone Whispers. Because there's so much quiet magic waiting here to help you sleep. The morning sun spilled lazily through the tall, arched windows of the grand hall, falling in long, golden stripes across the polished marble floors. In one corner, a gilded chair sat empty, its velvet cushion still warm from the night before. Outside, the garden was quiet, dew sparkling softly on the rose petals, and a few birds wandered without urgency, pecking at crumbs left on the stone path. Inside, the family moved slowly, not because they had to, but because nothing required haste. One of the servants carried a silver tray with steaming cups of tea, placing it carefully on a side table, then retreating without a word. The clocks ticked gently, their rhythm almost hypnotic, each second blending into the next, unremarkable and steady. No letters had arrived yet, and the day had no appointments. There were no guests expected, no urgent matters demanding attention. The house simply existed in its own quiet, stretching and yawning along with its inhabitants. It was a morning that might have seemed nothing to an outsider, but to anyone listening carefully, it was full of the softest, tiniest details, the faint rustle of curtains in the breeze, the distant chirp of a robin, the slow drip of the fountain outside. And in that gentle, unhurried calm, the family rested, watching the idle morning unfold, letting the sun warm their shoulders, letting the silence fill every corner, and letting their minds drift wherever they pleased. The corridors of the grand house stretched like rivers of quiet, their polished floors reflecting the soft light of the morning sun that filtered through tall, narrow windows. Along the walls, portraits hung in gilded frames, each one depicting a face from long ago. Ancestors with solemn expressions, powdered wigs, and elegant gowns. They watched over the hallways silently, their painted eyes seeming to follow even the slightest movement of a passing footstep. No one hurried through these corridors. Even the family's footsteps were slow and deliberate, as if the very atmosphere encouraged them to linger. A gentle breeze slipped in through an open window, causing the heavy drapes to sway lightly and the faint scent of lavender from the gardens to drift along the hall. The portraits remained unmoved, yet somehow attentive, offering an invisible companionship to the quiet wanderers of the house. The silence was punctuated only by the soft creak of the wooden floors and the occasional murmur of a distant servant attending to chores. A young heir paused before a large portrait of a stern-looking grandfather, running a finger along the dusty frame. He smiled faintly at the sight of the painted eyes staring back, as if sharing a secret known only to the two of them. Then he moved on slowly, taking a turn at the corridor's corner, leaving the grandfather's eyes to follow him once more. In one section of the hallway, a small table held a vase with drooping flowers, their petals slightly browned at the edges. They seemed almost in conversation with the portraits above, both frozen in time yet quietly present. Sunlight shifted across the corridor as the day advanced, illuminating different faces in succession. One moment a lady in blue, the next a man in gold embroidery, the light drawing attention to details that otherwise might go unnoticed. Servants moved discreetly along the sides, carrying trays or dusting surfaces, careful not to disturb the profound stillness. Even the clocks in the corridor chimed faintly, measured and unhurried, marking the passage of time in the gentlest way. It was a rhythm that made the family's pace feel natural, their idleness not lazy but deliberate, a conscious appreciation of quiet and space. By mid-morning, the corridors had settled into an almost meditative calm. The portraits continued their silent watch, as they had for decades, observing the soft movements, the whispered conversations, and the gentle glances exchanged between the walls themselves. Each shadow, each flicker of light, each creak of the floorboards was recorded in their painted eyes, a slow testimony to the life of the house when nothing was scheduled, and everything unfolded at the perfect, unhurried pace. In the softly lit morning room, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, scattering patterns across the polished wooden floor. A delicate teapot steamed gently on a silver tray, its aroma curling through the air like a slow-moving wisp. The tea leaves, dark and fragrant, had been steeping for several minutes, and the rich, earthy scent filled the room, inviting anyone nearby to pause and breathe. A few members of the family gathered around a low, oval table. Their conversations were soft, almost like whispers carried on the edges of the tea steam. They spoke of nothing urgent, nothing pressing, just the gentle rhythms of life that could only be noticed in unhurried moments. One mentioned a particularly beautiful rose in the garden, another commented on how the sunlight made the varnish on the floors gleam. Each sentence was slow, careful, like a drop of honey falling into a cup of tea, blending seamlessly into the quiet of the room. A servant poured the tea into delicate porcelain cups, the soft clink of china breaking the silence in the gentlest possible way. Steam rose from each cup, twisting lazily, and the family inhaled it, allowing the warmth to fill their palms and calm their thoughts. No one rushed, spoons stirred leisurely, cups were lifted slowly to lips, and even the act of sipping became an exercise in stillness. The very pace of the room encouraged contemplation and a subtle sense of peace, as if time itself had decided to slow and linger. Outside, the garden was alive with subtle sounds, the soft hum of bees around the roses, a breeze rustling through the leaves, the faint trickle of water from the fountain, but these noises only deepened the tranquility within. Conversations continued, drifting from one mundane topic to another. A description of a squirrel spotted on the terrace, a reflection on the color of the curtains, a gentle remark about the clouds sliding across the sky. Words flowed slowly, like the tea in their cups, calm and measured, creating a rhythm that was almost hypnotic in its repetition. By mid-morning, the room had settled into a quiet harmony. Teacups were refilled, spoons tapped gently against porcelain, and eyes occasionally met with soft smiles. Each sip, each word, each pause seemed to stretch time, allowing everyone present to fully inhabit the stillness. And as the tea was slowly finished, and the last steam curled upward from the cups, the family remained in that serene state, their minds quiet, their bodies calm, and their hearts in gentle sync with the quiet pace of the day. It was in these soft, ordinary moments, the tea steeping, the slow conversations, the unhurried gestures, that the house truly came alive, not with action or excitement, but with the deep, steady pulse of absolute calm. In the quiet of the afternoon, the grand drawing room offered a sanctuary from the outside world. A large fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth lined with polished brass and blackened stones. Logs lay ready, carefully stacked, their surfaces etched with the faint marks of previous flames. When a match was struck, a small flicker of orange light leapt to life, quickly growing as the logs began to crackle and sigh. The sound was gentle, a soft, rhythmic accompaniment to the stillness of the room. Each pop and whisper of burning would seem to stretch the air, drawing attention to the warmth that began to seep slowly into every corner. The fire was not loud or commanding, it did not demand notice. Instead, it encouraged quiet, encouraging those nearby to sink a little deeper into their chairs, to let shoulders relax and hands rest idly on armrests. Family members settled around the hearth, some draping themselves over cushioned seats, others leaning back in high-backed chairs with feet extended toward the gentle heat. Their eyes wandered lazily from the flames to the portraits on the walls, from the delicate patterns of the rug underfoot to the soft folds of curtains swaying slightly in the faint draft. Words were few, but when spoken, they were slow, careful, and almost melodic. One might comment on the way the firelight flickered across a polished table, another might remark on the shadows that stretched across the floor as the flames danced. Outside, the garden was quiet, save for the occasional bird or rustle of leaves. But inside, the room felt cocooned, as if the world beyond the walls had paused to allow time for the fire's slow, deliberate performance. The warmth rose steadily, pressing gently against cold fingertips and unhurried hands. Sips of tea were resumed, quietly, the porcelain clinking softly in tandem with the crackling wood. Servants moved in the background, their footsteps muffled, tending to small chores without breaking the room's languid rhythm. Even the clock seemed to tick more softly, as if in respect for the fire's gentle murmur. The flames themselves provided a subtle entertainment, twisting and curling in unpredictable but calm patterns, inviting eyes to follow them without any sense of urgency. By late afternoon, the room had settled into a state of almost meditative quiet. The fire crackled steadily, each sound marking the slow, comforting passage of time. It was in this unhurried warmth, the soft glow and gentle noise of burning logs, that the family found the kind of calm only a long, unscheduled day could offer. Minutes blurred into hours, and for those present, the world outside ceased to exist, leaving only the steady, soothing rhythm of the fire and the quiet heartbeat of the grand house. The morning had gently shifted into afternoon, and a few of the tall, narrow windows of the grand house had been opened, allowing a delicate breeze to wander through the halls. Sunlight streamed in, creating patches of warmth on the polished wooden floors, and the faint scent of roses and lavender carried with it the calm of the gardens outside. The air moved slowly, brushing against curtains and tickling the pages of books left open on side tables. In the quiet of the room, family members lingered near the windows, their eyes tracing the gentle sway of the garden's branches, watching petals glint in the sunlight. Birds flitted from bush to bush, occasionally pausing on the stone paths, their movements unhurried, as though they, too, were part of the day's tranquil rhythm. Even the fountains, usually so lively, trickled softly, the water catching the light in tiny, sparkling arcs. A gentle conversation drifted along with the breeze, quiet and deliberate. One family member remarked on the dew still clinging to the grass, another observed how a cloud slowly passed across the sky, shading the garden in shifting patterns. The words were soft, measured, almost melodic in their calmness, blending seamlessly with the faint rustle of leaves and the muted chirping of distant birds. Each observation was stretched in time, giving the mind space to wander, to notice every subtle movement, every soft sound. Sunlight painted the floors with golden rectangles, and as the wind stirred, curtains swayed slowly in response. A tray of tea, left near the window, steamed faintly in the warm light, forgotten for a moment as eyes turned outward to the gardens. There was no urgency here, no expectation to move or act. The house seemed to inhale with each gentle gust, holding the calm air inside its walls, and exhaling it softly through the open windows. Outside, paths wound lazily between rose bushes, hedges, and fountains, inviting footsteps that might never come. Inside, the family felt connected to the quiet world beyond, yet cocooned within the soft sounds, the gentle light, and the warmth of the house. A subtle peace settled over everything, as if the day had slowed, allowing each small detail, the flutter of leaves, the shine of dew, the shifting clouds, to be noticed and savored in perfect, unhurried rhythm. By late afternoon, the windows had become more than openings to the outside world, they were portals into a slow, steady, living landscape. The quiet gardens, the gentle wind, and the warmth of sunlight combined with the hushed interior to create a moment that stretched comfortably in time, a reminder of how beautiful and restful a day could be when nothing at all was scheduled. In a long, quiet room at the far end of the house, an old grand piano rested beneath a layer of dust, its polished wood dulled with the soft accumulation of time. No one had played it for days, perhaps weeks, and yet it seemed to hold a presence all its own. The sunlight streaming through the high windows reflected faintly on its surface, creating gentle streaks of gold and amber that shifted slowly as the day moved across the sky. A family member wandered into the room, drawn not by necessity but by curiosity, and lifted the heavy, velvet-covered lid. The piano keys, worn and slightly yellowed, were exposed to the light, waiting. A finger hovered above one key, then another, and a soft note escaped, lingering in the stillness of the room like a whispered secret. Each note was slow, deliberate, resonating quietly before fading into the calm, airy space. The room was otherwise silent. Outside, the gardens murmured softly with the movement of leaves in the gentle breeze, and from distant corridors, one could hear the faint, measured footsteps of servants tending to their chores. But inside the piano room, the music had a stillness all its own. Notes drifted lazily into the air, connecting with the dust motes that floated in the sunlight, each particle seeming to dance in time with the faint sound. Another key was pressed, this time a slightly deeper note, and it too lingered, stretching the perception of time. There was no rush, no performance, no expectation, only the slow, deliberate act of sound, echoing through a room that had long forgotten such gestures. A chair was pulled closer, a small cup of tea set beside it, and the family members sat, letting each note resonate through the bones, through the quiet corners of the house, through the soft, patient rhythm of an unscheduled day. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours, but the gentle music continued, each note fading and blending seamlessly into the next. Even when the hands paused, the memory of the sound seemed to remain in the air, like a shadow of movement or the faint scent of a flower that lingers after being touched. It was a music of stillness, of empty spaces filled with calm, an unhurried melody that required no listener to hurry, no clock to measure its tempo. By late afternoon, the piano rested once more under its velvet cover, but the room seemed to hum with quiet energy. The dust had not gone, but it was not unwanted. It gave the room texture, a sense of time slowly passing, unobserved and unhurried. The house, the family, and even the piano itself existed together in a gentle rhythm, a music of patience and quiet, the kind that invites the mind to drift, the body to relax, and sleep to arrive softly, without effort. In a quiet, sunlit study, a heavy wooden desk stood against the wall, polished smooth and gleaming faintly in the morning light. A single chair faced it, its cushion slightly indented from repeated use, as if it had been patiently waiting for someone to sit. On the desk lay a neat stack of envelopes, some stamped with foreign marks, some plain, all untouched, all full of potential news that might, or might not, ever arrive. A member of the family sat slowly in the chair, resting their elbows on the desk, fingers lightly touching the envelopes as if coaxing them to reveal their secrets. Outside, the gardens were calm, the faint breeze shifting leaves and petals without urgency. Every so often, the distant sound of a gate opening or closing echoed faintly through the halls, promising the arrival of a messenger, but always only in passing, leaving the envelopes just as they were. Time seemed to stretch in the study. The envelopes remained silent and still, waiting, and waiting. Occasionally, a servant would enter quietly to replenish ink bottles or straighten papers, leaving with a soft nod, careful not to disturb the contemplative quiet. The air smelled faintly of old parchment and wax seals, comforting in its consistency, almost as if the room itself understood the need for patience, the gentle acceptance that some things might never come. A hand lifted one envelope, turned it over in slow contemplation, and then set it back down again. Perhaps a letter would arrive today, perhaps tomorrow, or perhaps not at all. The uncertainty was not alarming. It was part of the rhythm of the day, another quiet note in the orchestra of stillness that filled the house. Each moment was drawn out, the ticking of the clock almost unnoticed, blending into the soft hum of the house's quiet life. Outside, sunlight drifted across the floorboards, tracing patterns that moved imperceptibly, a slow dance of light and shadow. The family member leaned back in their chair, eyes wandering to the portraits on the walls, to the window framing the gentle sway of the garden, and back to the envelopes. In this unhurried observation, there was a strange satisfaction, a sense of connection with the slow pulse of the house, with the rhythm of anticipation itself. By afternoon, the letters had not changed, and no messenger appeared, yet there was no disappointment. Waiting had become a gentle act of meditation, a time to notice the soft sounds of the world, the subtle creak of floorboards, the rustle of pages in a nearby book, the faint whisper of wind through half-open windows. In the stillness of the study, waiting for letters that might never arrive became less about expectation and more about presence, a quiet, calming practice that allowed the mind to slow, the body to relax, and sleep to approach naturally, gently, and without resistance. The afternoon sun shifted slowly across the sky, sending long, soft shadows stretching across the grand halls of the house. The marble floors, cool and smooth beneath bare feet, reflected the changing light in faint, golden streaks. Shadows from tall windows, carved railings, and ornate furniture moved imperceptibly as time drifted by, stretching, shrinking, and bending across the vast, quiet spaces. A family member wandered slowly down the corridor, letting their footsteps echo softly against the marble. Each step was deliberate, measured, almost ceremonious, as if even the smallest motion had to be appreciated. The shadows followed, shifting with their movements, creating a dance so slow and subtle that it could easily be mistaken for stillness. A hand brushed lightly over the smooth railing, tracing the cool stone while the warm sunlight slipped across the skin. No one spoke. The quiet was so complete that even the faintest sound, the soft creak of a door, the distant rustle of leaves from an open window, seemed amplified, drawing attention to every tiny detail of the room. Light played across the marble floors like a slow river, illuminating intricate patterns in the stone, revealing the tiny veins and swirls that had formed over decades. The shadows themselves seemed alive, moving gently with the sun, stretching longer as the afternoon wore on, curling softly against the edges of furniture and staircases. In a small corner of the hall, a chair sat waiting beneath a window, bathed in sunlight. A tray with a partially sipped cup of tea rested beside it, forgotten for a moment as eyes followed the dance of shadows. Even the family portraits lining the walls appeared to shift subtly under the changing light, their painted eyes catching glimmers of gold as the sun moved. It was as if the house itself were breathing, stretching and exhaling slowly in rhythm with the sun's passage. Servants moved quietly along the edges of the hall, careful not to disturb the unhurried flow. Each small step, each soft shuffle, blended seamlessly with the long shadows and the shifting light. No one was in a hurry, there was nowhere to be, nothing pressing to accomplish. The day existed for these small, exquisite observations, the gentle stretching of sunlight, the slow transformation of shadows, the cool smoothness of marble floors beneath warm skin. By late afternoon, the hall had become a mosaic of light and shadow, a living painting of calm and patience. The shifting forms on the marble seemed to echo the rhythm of the household itself, slow, deliberate, unhurried. In these quiet, ordinary moments, the family allowed themselves to simply exist, to notice the subtle beauty of time passing without expectation, and to feel the soothing calm that comes when everything slows, when every shadow stretches just a little longer, and when the world outside ceases to matter entirely. The house was quiet, but not silent. Soft, deliberate sounds filled the grand corridors, most notably, the gentle shuffle of slippers across polished floors. Each step was slow, unhurried, creating a rhythm that seemed almost musical in its subtlety. A family member moved from room to room, bare feet hidden in soft leather slippers, the soles gliding just enough to make a whisper of sound. It was a rhythm that marked time gently, without urgency, like a heartbeat stretched across a peaceful afternoon. The shuffling echoed faintly against the high ceilings and marble floors, blending with the soft hum of distant clocks and the occasional sigh of a door swinging on its hinges. The sound was oddly comforting, a reminder of life moving gently through the house without rush or expectation. Each step seemed measured, as though even walking had become an art form, a way of connecting with the slow pulse of the grand home. A tray of tea rested on a low table, the porcelain clinking softly as slippers approached. A hand lifted a cup, taking a slow sip, the warmth a contrast to the cool marble beneath. Then, slippers shuffled on, carrying a person past portraits, past velvet chairs, past the grand windows where sunlight streamed lazily across the floors. Each step was deliberate, each pause intentional, creating a quiet cadence that filled the space with a gentle sense of order and calm. Outside, the garden whispered softly in the breeze, leaves brushing together like faint applause. Inside, the rhythm of slippers became a part of the day itself, a soothing accompaniment to the quiet life of the household. Servants moved in similar patterns, their own slippers sliding silently, the combined sound forming a soft, hypnotic melody that seemed to stretch time. Even the house itself seemed to breathe in sync with these steps, the walls and floors echoing back the faint cadence in subtle harmony. By mid-afternoon, the rhythm had settled into a lullaby of its own. Slippers shuffled, paused, shifted slightly, and shuffled again. There was no hurry, no destination, only the slow, steady motion that allowed every listener, every observer, to become part of the quiet flow. With each glide across the polished floors, tension seemed to melt, thoughts grew lighter, and the mind surrendered to the gentle, repetitive pace of the house. In the rhythm of shuffling slippers, the family discovered a meditative comfort. The ordinary act of walking became extraordinary in its calm, a reminder that peace often resides in the smallest, most unassuming moments. And as the sun lowered, casting longer shadows across the marble, the slow shuffle continued, a soft, hypnotic soundtrack for minds ready to relax and drift gently toward sleep. In one of the long, quiet sitting rooms, the windows were adorned with silk curtains that swayed ever so slightly in the gentle afternoon breeze. The sunlight streamed through them, scattering soft golden patterns across the polished floors and faded rugs. Each fold of the fabric caught the light differently, creating shadows that shifted imperceptibly, stretching and shrinking as if moving to a rhythm too slow to notice. A family member leaned back in a high-backed chair, eyes half closed, watching the light drift across the room. The silk curtains responded softly to each breath of wind, brushing against themselves with a faint, whispering rustle. It was a sound so subtle it could almost be mistaken for the room itself breathing, a gentle exhale of warmth and calm. The air carried the scent of the gardens outside, mingling faintly with the faint musk of polished wood and old books. The curtains acted as both barrier and bridge, keeping the stillness inside while hinting at the life beyond the glass. Leaves moved gently in the garden, their shadows joining with those of the curtains to form intricate patterns across the floors, slowly stretching toward the corners of the room. A soft conversation drifted from one corner, voices low, deliberate, carefully measured. One person remarked on the way the sunlight touched the edge of the rug, another noted a distant bird landing lightly on the stone fountain. Each observation was slow, savored, blending seamlessly with the visual dance of light and fabric. No one spoke hurriedly, words, like the curtains, drifted lazily, moving as gently as the air that carried them. The teapot on a nearby table steamed faintly, the heat rising in thin spirals that caught the sunlight, joining the slow, quiet motion of the curtains. A hand reached for a cup of tea, lifting it carefully and letting the warmth seep into the palm. Then, eyes returned to the windows, watching shadows creep imperceptibly across the room, observing the play of light that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the house itself. By mid-afternoon, the room had settled into a meditative calm. Each curtain fold, each drifting shadow, each ripple of light across the polished floors contributed to a quiet, hypnotic pace. There was no urgency, no plan, no schedule. Just the gentle passage of time, slow and deliberate, inviting anyone present to pause, breathe, and feel the soothing, sleepy rhythm of the household. And in that golden glow, drifting through silk curtains and stretching across the quiet room, the family existed simply, peacefully, fully immersed in the slow, serene beauty of the unscheduled day. In a quiet corner of the grand library, sunlight spilled across tall shelves lined with leather-bound books. Their spines were faded, titles embossed in gold now dulled by time, and the faint scent of parchment and aged ink lingered in the air. The library was calm, almost sacred, and the only sound was the soft whisper of pages turning as someone slowly perused a book, lingering over each word as if the act itself were a gentle meditation. A family member sat in a high-backed chair, legs crossed, with a large tome resting open on their lap. Fingers traced the lines of text carefully, lifting and turning pages with deliberate slowness. Each movement made a soft, rustling sound, the whisper of paper against paper, filling the room with a quiet rhythm that matched the calm pulse of the household. Outside, the breeze stirred the leaves of the gardens, and sunlight shifted through tall windows, illuminating golden letters on the pages for brief, fleeting moments. Occasionally, a hand would pause, hovering over a paragraph, letting the mind wander over the imagery, the stories, or the carefully crafted words of someone long gone. There was no hurry to finish, no urgency to understand everything at once. Each sentence could be savored, each chapter absorbed slowly, like a cup of warm tea held between gentle palms. Even the rustle of the pages seemed to echo softly through the high ceilings, mingling with the faint ticking of distant clocks. A small table beside the chair held another stack of books, left for later exploration. The family members' eyes drifted from one volume to the next, occasionally lifting to observe the room, the light, or the shifting shadows that danced across the floorboards. Somewhere far away, a servant quietly adjusted a lamp, the sound muted and unobtrusive, blending into the soft symphony of paper, sunlight, and stillness. Minutes stretched into hours. Each whisper of turning pages seemed to slow the very air around it, inviting the reader, and any listener, to sink deeper into calm. There was a hypnotic comfort in the repetition of the soft, deliberate movements, the gentle rustling of paper, the slow drifting of light across worn leather covers. It was a quiet meditation, an unhurried connection to the past, to knowledge preserved, to moments spent in contemplative silence. By late afternoon, the family member closed the book with careful hands, letting the pages settle with a faint sigh. The library returned to its hushed serenity, waiting patiently for the next reader to breathe life into its stories. And in that quiet corner, amidst the whispers of pages in old books, time slowed, the mind softened, and the gentle rhythm of an unscheduled day continued, inviting relaxation, reflection, and the slow, natural drift towards sleep. The central courtyard of the grand house was still, bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon. Stone pathways wound carefully between trimmed hedges and low fountains, yet there was no one to walk them. Only the leaves, crisp and golden from an early autumn, had ventured beyond the trees, drifting slowly across the marble and cobblestones. They swirled with the occasional breath of wind, rustling softly, filling the quiet space with the faintest whisper of motion. A family member stepped lightly onto the courtyard, slippers muted against the smooth stone. They paused, watching a single leaf tumble along the path, carried gently by the wind, spinning and turning in its slow, aimless journey. Each movement seemed deliberate yet effortless, a dance that invited the mind to slow, to notice, to drift along with it. The courtyard, empty of human presence, felt alive in its stillness, animated by sunlight, shadow, and the quiet shuffle of leaves. A distant fountain gurgled faintly, droplets catching the sunlight and throwing tiny specks of light onto the walls surrounding the courtyard. The sound was steady but unobtrusive, a gentle accompaniment to the whisper of leaves against stone. The family member walked slowly along the edge of a fountain, fingers lightly tracing the cool, carved stone, pausing to notice the soft gleam of water reflecting the sky above. Time stretched lazily in this empty space, measured not by hours or minutes, but by the slow, deliberate rhythm of nature itself. No one spoke. Even footsteps were careful, slow, considerate of the silence that seemed to settle like a blanket over the courtyard. A few birds hopped along the edges, pecking at scattered seeds, but they moved with the same calm, deliberate pace as the humans. Occasionally, a leaf would land gently on the shoulder of a person standing still, as if the courtyard itself were acknowledging their presence without demanding attention. As the afternoon light shifted, shadows lengthened across the stone, following the patterns of hedges, fountains, and fallen leaves. Each shadow moved imperceptibly, joining with the gold and crimson of the scattered foliage to create a mosaic of calm, a visual lullaby that seemed designed to slow the mind. The courtyard, though empty, felt inhabited by the quiet rhythm of life, a gentle, patient movement that required nothing but observation. By evening, the courtyard remained silent but alive. Leaves had shifted, fountains had murmured, and the sun had dipped slightly, stretching shadows into long, soft fingers across the stone. And in that serene emptiness, amidst the fallen leaves and slow, quiet movements, the family found a rare sense of peace. An unscheduled, unhurried moment that invited them to pause, breathe, and slowly let sleep approach in its gentle, natural way. One remarked on the sunlight slanting through the windows, another on the faint pattern of shadows falling across the rug. A small, careful debate arose about the correct way to arrange the teacups, followed by laughter so soft it barely stirred the air. The voices did not hurry, each pause was long, deliberate, giving time for thought, for reflection, for the mind to drift gently alongside the words. Even disagreements resolved themselves slowly, sliding back into quiet observation of the room rather than urgency to conclude. Outside, the garden was calm, faint rustles of leaves drifting in through slightly open windows. The soft creak of chairs or the whisper of slippers across polished floors punctuated the conversation, but never intruded. Words intertwined with sounds of the house, blending into a steady, soothing rhythm that marked the passage of time without pressing for action. Every exchange, every repetition, every gentle laugh seemed to slow the minutes, expanding the quiet space of the room into something almost meditative. Sometimes the conversations returned to earlier remarks, revisiting ideas like old friends wandering back through familiar paths. There was no impatience, no expectation of novelty. Each phrase was appreciated for itself, each observation considered, spoken, and allowed to linger in the calm air. Even the simplest sentence, a comment on the weather, the color of a vase, the texture of a curtain, felt meaningful, a quiet acknowledgement of life in its slowest, most deliberate form. As the sun dipped lower, shadows grew longer, stretching across the floor and walls. Conversations continued, a gentle circle of words rising and falling, repeating and evolving at their own pace. There was comfort in their endless motion, a reassurance that the day would continue to unfold, softly, slowly, and predictably. By evening, the voices had softened further, more murmurs than words, blending seamlessly with the quiet of the house. Conversations that had circled without end became part of the rhythm of the day itself, another gentle element in the slow, soothing cadence of unhurried life. And in that slow, calm exchange of words, the family found a quiet harmony, a sense of peace that invited them to relax fully, to breathe deeply, and to drift gently toward sleep. The grand house seemed to exist not by the motion of its inhabitants, but by the steady rhythm of its clocks. Each drawing room, lined with high-backed chairs and polished tables, held a timepiece of its own. Some were tall and stately, with pendulums swinging in slow, deliberate arcs. Others rested on mantelpieces, their faces quiet but precise. The ticking of each clock, faint yet persistent, blended into a calm, hypnotic melody that filled the halls with the slow, unhurried pulse of life. A family member moved from one drawing room to another, pausing to admire the intricacies of each timepiece. Hands traced the carved wood of an ornate grandfather clock, noting the gentle swing of the pendulum, listening to the soft tick-tock that marked the passage of moments. The sound was steady, rhythmic, unassuming, a gentle companion to the otherwise quiet afternoon. Even without looking, one could sense the slow progression of time, measured not by urgency, but by the deliberate heartbeat of these familiar instruments. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, catching on brass fittings, gleaming faintly on clock faces, highlighting the intricate patterns of etched numbers. The shadows of pendulums moved slowly across walls, stretching and shrinking as the day drifted on, creating a visual rhythm that complemented the auditory cadence of ticking. Each click of the second hand was a soft reminder of time passing, not hurried, not demanding, but continuous, soothing in its predictability. The family moved gently, some settling into chairs to observe the quiet dance of shadows and light, others pausing to adjust a clock's minute hand or to wind the key slowly, deliberately. The smallest motions echoed softly in the expansive rooms, harmonizing with the steady tick-tock, creating an atmosphere of calm awareness, a consciousness of time measured in patience and tranquility rather than haste. From distant corridors, the faint shuffle of slippers and the whisper of pages in books intertwined with the ticking, forming a slow, immersive soundscape. Every tick, every swing of a pendulum, every soft chime from an hourly strike blended seamlessly into the serene rhythm of the day. The house felt alive not through sudden motion, but through these gentle, constant markers of existence, guiding the family through hours stretched like soft silk. By late afternoon, the clocks had become more than instruments, they were companions, silent witnesses to the steady, unhurried life within the house. Their ticking encouraged reflection, calm observation, and gentle immersion in the ordinary, unnoticed moments. And in the quiet echo of clocks ticking slowly across drawing rooms, the family found themselves attuned to the subtle, hypnotic rhythm of unscheduled time, a rhythm that lulled the mind, eased the body, and invited the slow approach of sleep. In the grand drawing room, chairs waited patiently, polished and poised, ready to support the family in their unhurried routines. Some were high-backed and ornate, carved with delicate patterns that caught the light. Others were softer, cushioned and inviting, placed near windows where sunlight spilled lazily across the floor. When someone settled into one, the chair responded with a subtle shift, a quiet creak or soft sigh of wood and upholstery adjusting under gentle weight. A family member sank slowly into a cushioned seat by the fireplace, letting the chair mold perfectly to their posture. The sound it made was faint, almost imperceptible, yet it carried a sense of satisfaction, a quiet acknowledgement of comfort achieved. Outside, the gardens remained still, birds flitting slowly from branch to branch, their movement mirrored inside only by the swaying of curtains or the shifting shadows on the polished floor. Other chairs in the room experienced similar adjustments. A servant paused to read a letter, leaning back just enough to let the chair respond to their presence. Another family member turned toward a portrait, rocking ever so slightly, listening to the soft sigh of the wood beneath them. Each sound, small and deliberate, punctuated the quiet rhythm of the household, joining the ticking of distant clocks, the whisper of pages in books, and the faint rustle of slippers across marble. Even the empty chairs seemed aware of their role. The polished armrests and curved backs waited silently, anticipating the gentle descent of hands or the careful adjustment of cushions. There was a serenity in the way furniture seemed to breathe along with the people who used it, subtle, patient, and unobtrusive. The house itself felt as if it were exhaling, its rhythm guided by these tiny, intimate sounds of comfort settling into place. The family lingered in these moments, adjusting themselves and their chairs with a measured calm. No one rushed, every movement was deliberate, every shift slow and careful. Each chair's soft sigh was a small meditation, a gentle reminder that the household existed in harmony with its own pace, and that even the simplest actions, sitting, leaning, adjusting, could become rituals of relaxation. By late afternoon, the drawing room had settled into a gentle lull. Chairs had found their occupants, and each one seemed content, cradling bodies in quiet satisfaction. In the soft symphony of sighs, shifting cushions, and careful adjustments, the family felt a deep, soothing calm. The world outside faded, the house's quiet rhythm took over, and slowly, softly, the mind began to drift toward rest, cradled by the gentle sigh of chairs adjusted comfortably. In the quiet of the afternoon, the soft clink of porcelain echoed gently through the halls as tea trays were carried with deliberate care. Silver handles gleamed in the muted sunlight, polished to a calm, reflective sheen, and the faint steam rising from the teapots curved lazily in the air, curling like slow-moving ribbons. Each tray, carefully balanced in both hands, moved smoothly from one room to another, the footsteps of the servers soft and measured. A family member received a tray and lifted a delicate cup with hands that moved slowly, savoring the warmth seeping through the porcelain. There was no hurry, no pressing engagement elsewhere. The passing of tea became a ritual, a gentle choreography of observation and care. Trays glided along polished floors, cups were set carefully on tables, and the soft aroma of brewed tea filled every corner of the house, blending with the faint scent of polished wood and the lingering perfume of gardens beyond. Outside, the sunlight shifted, casting long, golden streaks through the windows. Inside, the trays were carried in near silence, the soft clatter of porcelain and silver harmonizing with distant sounds, the slow tick-tock of clocks, the whisper of pages turning, and the subtle shuffle of slippers on marble floors. Every motion was deliberate, measured to match the quiet rhythm of the household. Even a misstep, a slight adjustment of a teacup, was performed with calm precision, no hurry, no need for correction, only gentle care. The family lingered with their cups, hands resting lightly on the handles, inhaling the fragrant steam and letting it seep into their awareness. Conversation was minimal, just a soft comment on the tea's warmth or aroma, a shared observation of sunlight moving across the room. Words were secondary. The act of passing and receiving tea became the focus, a meditation in movement, a quiet exchange that connected people through simple, unhurried ritual. By mid-afternoon, several trays had been passed, refilled, and carried again. The rhythm had become hypnotic, soft steps, careful hands, delicate clinks, the slow lifting and setting of cups, and the faint curl of steam twisting lazily toward the ceiling. Each gesture was ordinary, yet in its repetition, it acquired a soothing, mesmerizing quality that invited attention and then released it, allowing the mind to wander gently, comfortably, toward rest. As the sunlight faded slightly, the tea trays were returned to their stations, empty but polished, ready for another round if needed. And in the quiet aftermath, the house retained the gentle echoes of passing trays, soft porcelain, and deliberate hands, leaving behind a lingering sense of calm and rhythm. In this slow, unhurried movement, the family found peace, and the mind, attuned to the quiet flow of life, began to drift softly toward sleep. As evening settled gently over the grand house, long halls were lit by the soft glow of candles. Their flames danced delicately, casting golden light on polished floors and ornate walls. Shadows flickered across portraits and high ceilings, stretching and shrinking with each subtle movement of the flames. The air was still, warm, and faintly scented with melted wax, creating a quiet, soothing atmosphere that invited the family to slow their pace and linger. A servant moved carefully down one corridor, carrying a silver candelabrum. Each candle was positioned with deliberate precision, its flame steady yet alive, responding to the smallest drafts that wandered through the open windows. The flickering light played across gilded frames and carved moldings, revealing intricate details that had been unnoticed in the daylight. Every shimmer, every glint of reflection, added to the gentle rhythm of the evening. Family members walked slowly beneath the candlelight, their steps muted, the soft shuffle of slippers blending with the gentle hiss and occasional crackle of wax. They paused at intervals, watching the flames sway, the shadows move, and the golden light shift across the floor. Even ordinary objects, a vase, a chair, a doorknob, seemed transformed by the flickering illumination, quiet and alive in a way that encouraged careful observation and stillness. Conversations were whispers, soft and measured, echoing faintly through the long halls. One might remark on the way a flame reflected in the glass of a framed portrait, another on the slow lengthening of shadows along the floor. Words drifted in time with the candlelight, looping gently, circling back, and fading into silence. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, allowing the flames to dictate the rhythm of the evening. The longer one walked beneath the candles, the slower time seemed to pass. Each flicker was a reminder of stillness, a quiet heartbeat in the expansive halls. Even the tiniest movements, a hand adjusting a sleeve, a foot shifting slightly, were absorbed into the gentle dance of light and shadow. There was no rush, no urgency, only the slow unfolding of evening, measured by the soft, flickering glow of wax and flame. By nightfall, the hallways were aglow with candlelight, warm and steady, though never still. Shadows continued their subtle play, stretching across walls and floors, while the faint smell of melting wax lingered in the air. In the quiet of these long halls, amidst flickering flames and gentle whispers, the family felt the pace of life slow, their minds softening, their bodies relaxing, and the gentle rhythm of the house guiding them naturally toward rest and sleep. In the quiet expanse of the garden, fountains sparkled under the soft sunlight, sending delicate sprays of water into the air. Each droplet caught the light, scattering tiny rainbows that lingered for a moment before falling gently back into the basins below. The sound was steady, soothing, a gentle plinking and rushing that blended seamlessly with the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of birds. A family member leaned against the stone edge of a fountain, watching the water arch gracefully, rise, and descend in an unhurried rhythm. Fingers traced the cool, damp stone, following the curves of carved decorations as the spray danced upward. No one spoke, there was no hurry. Time itself seemed to slow to match the gentle rise and fall of the water. Each drop glimmered and then disappeared, a quiet reminder that moments, like the fountain sprays, could be fleeting yet endlessly beautiful. Sunlight shifted slowly across the garden, illuminating sprays at different angles. Some droplets sparkled brightly, catching the eye. Others fell in soft shadow, almost invisible until noticed in passing. The fountains were more than decorative, they became a meditation in motion, a calm spectacle that demanded nothing but quiet attention. Even the sound of water, though continuous, was never intrusive, it was a slow, rhythmic companion to thoughts drifting lazily like clouds across the sky. Nearby, leaves swayed gently in the breeze, and a small bird hopped along the fountain's edge, pecking at scattered seeds. The quiet interaction of nature with the fountains created a sense of harmony, an effortless choreography that unfolded without haste. Watching the water rise and fall, one could imagine the day stretching endlessly, each moment folding into the next, uninterrupted and serene. A servant moved quietly along the path, adjusting a stone bench or sweeping leaves aside, their movements gentle and measured. Even their actions, though purposeful, seemed to mimic the fountain's rhythm, slow and deliberate, blending with the hypnotic cadence of water and sunlight. Cups of tea rested nearby, steam curling lazily toward the sky, catching faint light, joining the soft, reflective movement of the fountains. By mid-afternoon, the fountains continued their quiet performance, the water shimmering, the air cool and scented faintly with stone and greenery. In this slow, unhurried observation, the family felt a gentle ease settle over them. Watching fountains spray in sunlight became a form of quiet meditation, a subtle lullaby of motion and light. Minds softened, bodies relaxed, and the slow, soothing rhythm of water encouraged a gentle drift toward rest, leaving the outside world behind in its serene, sparkling quiet. In a quiet corner of the house, wide windowsills stretched beneath tall, sunlit windows. They were deep and smooth, polished from years of careful use, offering a place to sit, lean, or simply rest the hands and gaze outward. On these windowsills, family members often lingered, letting their thoughts drift slowly as sunlight poured through the glass, creating soft patterns on the floor and walls. A child sat cross-legged, legs tucked beneath them, staring at the garden beyond. Their eyes followed a leaf spiraling to the ground, then wandered to the slow sway of branches, the shimmer of sunlight on stone fountains, the distant flight of a bird across the lawn. Their thoughts meandered in tandem with these quiet movements, stretching and looping without hurry or expectation. Daydreams bloomed naturally, each one soft and fluid, floating gently across the mind like drifting clouds. Nearby, an adult rested their elbows on another windowsill, chin cradled in their hands, observing the same garden in a different way. They noticed subtle details, the faint pattern of sunlight on the stone path, the soft shadows of leaves falling across a marble bench, the shimmering reflection of water in a fountain. With each observation, the mind slowed further, thoughts meandering calmly, untethered from schedules or obligations, embracing the gentle rhythm of quiet observation. The air carried a faint scent of roses and freshly cut grass, drifting through the open windows and mingling with the warmth of sunlight on skin. Curtains fluttered softly, brushing against the windowsill and adding their own quiet movement to the scene. Each breath, each glance, each tiny shift in posture became part of a meditative rhythm, reinforcing the slow, comforting pace of the afternoon. Outside, the gardens moved with a lazy, deliberate grace. Shadows stretched and shifted, fountains glittered in the sunlight, and leaves drifted aimlessly across paths. Inside, the wide windowsills offered a perch from which to observe it all, a safe place to let the mind wander without urgency. Even the faintest sounds, the distant clink of a teacup, the rustle of a page in a book, seemed to harmonize with the gentle cadence of daydreams. By late afternoon, the windowsills had become little islands of calm, places where thoughts could drift freely, unhurried and untroubled. Watching sunlight move across the floors, tracing shadows and highlights, and allowing the mind to wander slowly across the garden beyond, the family discovered a profound sense of ease. In the soft embrace of daydreams, cradled by wide windowsills, the mind could relax, the body could rest, and the quiet, unscheduled day continued its gentle, hypnotic flow toward evening, and toward sleep. In the soft light of late afternoon, laughter drifted gently through the halls, soft and measured, almost hesitant. It was the kind of quiet laughter that emerged from small, simple moments. A shared glance across the room, a tiny mishap with a tea tray, or the subtle humor in a comment about sunlight shifting across the floor. There was no urgency, no boisterous cheer, only a gentle, rhythmic rise and fall that seemed to echo in harmony with the slow heartbeat of the house. A family member leaned back in a chair, letting a small smile linger on their lips after a whispered joke or playful observation. The laughter floated through the room, touching portraits on the walls, glancing off polished tables, brushing past curtains that swayed softly in the warm breeze. It was fleeting, delicate, dissolving almost immediately into the quiet hum of the household, leaving a sense of calm satisfaction behind. Footsteps and the faint shuffle of slippers accompanied the soft sound, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of ordinary life. Another family member laughed quietly in response, their voice low, careful, measured, harmonizing with the previous chuckle. Moments like these were small islands of connection, yet they were never intrusive or demanding. They existed purely in the gentle enjoyment of presence, in the slow, deliberate appreciation of being together in an unscheduled day. Outside, the gardens remained still, only the leaves rustling faintly in a lazy wind. The sound of laughter seemed to blend with distant bird calls and the slow trickle of a fountain, a delicate overlay that added warmth to the otherwise calm, measured rhythm of the house. Even when the laughter faded entirely, its soft echo remained, lingering like a memory of comfort, a quiet reassurance that life in these halls moved gently, without haste. In the quiet aftermath, family members continued their slow routines. A hand adjusted a cushion, a teacup was lifted with care, a page of a book turned softly. The laughter had disappeared, yet the trace it left in the air, a subtle warmth, a lightness of spirit, remained, enhancing the sense of calm that filled the rooms. Each fading sound, each soft smile, contributed to the hypnotic cadence of the household, a rhythm that encouraged relaxation, reflection, and gentle ease. By evening, the laughter had completely dissolved into silence. The halls were still, bathed in warm light and long shadows, each corner settling into quiet expectation. And in that tranquil hush, the mind could drift freely, the body could soften, and the family, comforted by the memory of quiet laughter that faded into nothing, could allow sleep to approach slowly, naturally, and without resistance. In a quiet sunlit room, feathered sofas waited patiently, their cushions plump and inviting, soft enough to cradle the body in gentle repose. The late afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting warm, golden patterns across the upholstery and the polished floors. The room seemed to hum quietly with stillness, a perfect space for pausing, for slowing down, and for sinking into rest. A family member eased themselves onto a sofa, the cushions yielding softly under their weight. The feathers shifted with a faint sigh, adjusting to the curves of the body, and a delicate sense of comfort settled like a warm blanket. Eyes half closed, hands resting lightly on the arms, the person let themselves sink slowly, feeling the softness wrap around them, isolating them from the gentle clatter and faint footsteps elsewhere in the house. Outside, the gardens whispered with the soft movement of leaves, the occasional flutter of birds, the distant ripple of a fountain. Inside, the quiet was punctuated only by subtle sounds. A page turning in a nearby book, the faint creak of a chair as someone adjusted their posture, the gentle shift of cushions as other family members found their places on neighboring sofas. The room seemed to breathe in harmony with these soft motions, a serene rhythm that invited relaxation. Moments stretched lazily. The sunlight shifted across the floor, tracing slow, imperceptible patterns on the fabric. A soft sigh of contentment, almost imperceptible, escaped from someone reclining further into the sofa. Even the smallest details, the faint puff of a feather, the delicate warmth of sunlight on skin, seemed amplified in the quiet, encouraging the mind to drift, the muscles to loosen, and the body to surrender to the gentle pull of rest. Some family members allowed themselves short, unhurried naps, heads resting on pillows, hands folded gently across laps. Their breathing deepened, slow and rhythmic, in sync with the hushed cadence of the house. The sun continued its lazy arc, shadows lengthening, sliding softly across the feathered sofas and polished floors. Every shift of light, every faint creak or sigh, became a lullaby for the mind, a gentle nudge toward deep relaxation. By late afternoon, the sofas had become islands of calm, softly cradling quiet bodies in their plush embrace. Thoughts drifted aimlessly, unhurried, untethered from any urgency. And in this serene space, surrounded by warm sunlight, soft feathers, and the hushed rhythm of the house, the family found themselves gently surrendering to sleep. The afternoon nap became a slow, meditative passage, a quiet celebration of stillness, comfort, and the peaceful passage of unscheduled time. The afternoon sun poured through tall, stately windows, spilling golden light across the polished floors of the grand house. Every surface it touched seemed to glow softly, reflecting warmth back into the rooms, inviting footsteps to linger and bodies to rest. The sunlight shifted slowly as the hours passed, stretching long, soft patterns across marble and wood, illuminating the tiniest imperfections, the faint scratches and swirls that spoke of decades of quiet use. A family member walked barefoot across the floors, letting the warmth seep through the soles of their feet. Each step was slow, deliberate, measured against the quiet rhythm of the house. Sunlight caught the edges of tables, the curves of chair legs, and the polished handles of doors, scattering faint reflections that moved imperceptibly with each passing moment. The sensation of warmth, of light sliding across cool stone, seemed to stretch time, encouraging every observer to pause and take notice of the subtle beauty of ordinary moments. The air was still, except for the occasional soft creak of floorboards, the faint shuffle of slippers, or the whisper of pages turning in a nearby library. The polished floors seemed to hold the sun's heat gently, releasing it slowly, a patient companion to anyone wandering through the rooms. Each step across the glowing surfaces became meditative, a quiet acknowledgement of movement without hurry, of presence without urgency. Sunlight highlighted the patterns in rugs, the delicate grains of wooden panels, and the shimmer of brass fittings on furniture. Shadows moved alongside the light, stretching and shrinking with the slow drift of the sun. The interplay of warmth and shadow created a calm spectacle, a living artwork that changed imperceptibly over the course of the day. Family members paused often, letting their eyes follow the slow shifting of light, tracing the shapes it cast, and feeling the subtle pull of calm that came with each observation. By late afternoon, the sunlight had mellowed, softening into a golden glow that touched every corner of the house. The polished floors reflected this light, multiplying it across walls and ceilings, creating a gentle, immersive warmth. The rhythm of sun and shadow, of warmth and stillness, became hypnotic. A slow, soothing meditation that invited the mind to drift, the muscles to relax, and the body to yield to the quiet, unscheduled passage of the day. In the calm embrace of sunlit floors, the family discovered an extraordinary serenity in the ordinary. Each step, each glance, each long moment bathed in warmth was a quiet invitation to rest. And as the sunlight slowly shifted, stretching shadows across the rooms, the mind softened, breathing slowed, and the gentle, hypnotic warmth of polished floors carried everyone closer to sleep. A gentle breeze drifted through the house, carrying with it the delicate scent of roses from distant gardens. The fragrance was soft, sweet, and subtle, weaving through the open windows and across polished floors, settling lightly on furniture, curtains, and even the clothing of the family members. It was a scent that invited slow breathing, quiet thought, and a lingering sense of calm, as if the air itself were participating in the unhurried rhythm of the household. Family members paused in their gentle movements, inhaling deeply, allowing the aroma to fill their senses. The scent of roses seemed to awaken memories of quiet strolls along shaded paths, of afternoon sunlight brushing against blooms, and of the soft rustle of petals in the wind. Even without leaving the house, the fragrance created a bridge between indoors and the distant gardens, connecting the interior stillness with the slow, measured life outside. The air shifted with subtle movements, curtains fluttered softly, the faint shuffle of slippers echoed along hallways, and somewhere, a tray of tea was passed with delicate care. The scent of roses mingled with these tiny sounds, becoming a gentle melody of experience, unhurried and soothing. Each inhalation seemed to slow time, drawing attention to the calm rhythm of the house, the slow unfolding of shadows, the soft creak of chairs, and the shifting light on polished floors. In the drawing room, a family member leaned near a window, eyes half closed, allowing the fragrance to mingle with the warmth of the sunlight. The subtle sweetness encouraged daydreams, gentle thoughts drifting lazily like the clouds outside. It was impossible to hurry in the presence of such quiet beauty. Each inhalation, each sigh, each slow motion of the body contributed to a meditative state of mind. As the afternoon wore on, the scent of roses seemed to saturate every room, lingering even in spaces far from the garden. It wrapped around books, furniture, and fabric, creating an invisible, calming presence that encouraged reflection and rest. Family members moved slowly, savoring each moment, each inhalation, each soft interaction, aware of the invisible thread connecting them to the fragrant gardens beyond. By evening, the rose's perfume had become a quiet lullaby, subtle yet persistent, a gentle rhythm to accompany the fading light. In the stillness, the family discovered an extraordinary serenity in the ordinary, a hypnotic calm that filled the air. And as the scent lingered, drifting softly through open windows, the mind relaxed, the body softened, and the household surrendered fully to the slow, soothing embrace of unscheduled time, inviting sleep to arrive naturally and effortlessly. The house seemed larger in the quiet of late afternoon, its long corridors stretching endlessly, polished floors reflecting the soft light from high windows. Every sound carried farther here than in any other room, yet even echoes were muted, softened by carpets, tapestries, and careful attention to quiet movement. Occasionally, a single footstep would fall, deliberate and slow, and it would travel down the corridor in a gentle, measured rhythm, bouncing faintly against walls and ceilings before fading into silence. A family member walked alone, slippers barely brushing the floor, each step producing a soft, hollow resonance that mingled with the distant ticking of a clock. The sound was never loud or abrupt. It was calm, hypnotic, a steady beat that marked the passage of time in a space otherwise undisturbed. As they moved, the echo lingered for a moment before dissolving, leaving only the quiet anticipation of the next step. Empty corridors held their own character. Portraits and paintings watched silently as footsteps passed, their shadows stretching along the walls in gentle, slow arcs. Light spilled in from windows, creating a warm glow that mingled with the echoes, softening each sound and giving it a slow, floating quality. The corridors themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting subtly in harmony with each movement, as if the house were alive with calm, patient awareness. At times, another figure joined, moving deliberately, allowing footsteps to overlap in quiet harmony. There was no hurry, no sense of urgency, only a gentle interplay of sound and silence, a slow rhythm that filled the space with comfort. Slippers shuffled softly across marble, carpets absorbed some of the resonance, and echoes continued their unhurried journey down the length of the hall, stretching time in a gentle, hypnotic way. Even when footsteps ceased, the corridor did not feel empty or lifeless. The faint hum of distant voices, the soft rustle of curtains, and the whisper of the wind through open windows blended with the memory of echoes, creating a layered sense of calm. Each echo reminded the family of continuity, of presence, of slow movement through unscheduled hours. By evening, shadows lengthened along the walls, softening the echoes and blending sound and silence into one gentle, immersive experience. In these quiet corridors, every step became a meditation, every echo a lullaby. The mind softened, the body relaxed, and the gentle rhythm of footsteps fading into emptiness carried the household into a serene, sleep-ready calm. In the quiet of the late afternoon, a tray of tea rested on a polished side table, steam rising slowly from porcelain cups, curling into the warm air like delicate wisps of mist. It had been prepared carefully, poured with deliberate attention, yet now it waited, forgotten, in the hush of unscheduled time. The teapot's gentle warmth seeped into the tray, the silver handles gleaming in the sunlight that spilled through tall windows. A faint clink of spoons and the soft aroma of steeped leaves lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of roses from the garden beyond. The tea seemed almost alive in its stillness, a quiet companion to the calm of the room, offering warmth, comfort, and presence without demanding attention. Cups were left upright, saucers perfectly aligned, sugar cubes untouched, and the air itself seemed to pause around them. Family members passed through the room slowly, glancing briefly at the tray, but never breaking the gentle rhythm of their day. Some were distracted by the sunlight spilling across polished floors. Others lingered at windowsills, lost in daydreams. The tea waited patiently, as if aware that its purpose was not to be rushed, not to be consumed quickly, but simply to exist quietly, offering a comforting pause in the unhurried flow of the household. Outside, the gardens remained still, the occasional bird hopping through the paths, the fountain sending tiny arcs of water into the sunlit air. Inside, the soft rustle of curtains and the faint shuffle of slippers provided a gentle accompaniment to the forgotten tea, blending with the faint tick-tock of distant clocks. Even in its neglect, the tray seemed part of the house's quiet rhythm, a silent testament to patience and calm. A family member finally paused near the table, resting a hand lightly on a cup, feeling the warmth of the porcelain. There was no urgency to drink, no need to act. For a long moment, they simply observed the steam rising and the sunlight glinting on silver handles. The tea, still and warm, became part of a larger meditation, a quiet, unhurried appreciation for ordinary objects, small rituals, and the soft unfolding of time. By evening, the tea remained, faintly fragrant, untouched but serene. In the waiting, in the stillness, it had become part of the house's hypnotic rhythm. The aroma lingered, the steam curled faintly, and the calm, unscheduled day carried the family gently toward rest. In that quiet pause, the mind softened, the body relaxed, and the gentle presence of afternoon tea forgotten in waiting invited the slow approach of sleep. In the quiet of the afternoon, a soft breeze wandered through the grand house, slipping through slightly open windows and brushing against tall, flowing curtains. The fabric responded with delicate movements, swaying and fluttering gently as if breathing with the wind. Each motion was slow, deliberate, almost musical in its softness, creating a subtle, hypnotic rhythm that filled the rooms with calm. A family member paused near a window, fingers brushing lightly against the edge of a curtain, feeling its smooth texture and the faint resistance as it swayed back and forth. The sound of fabric shifting in the breeze was soft yet distinct, a gentle whisper that blended with the quiet tick of clocks, the faint shuffle of slippers, and the slow sigh of chairs adjusting to weight. It was a sound that demanded attention yet invited relaxation, drawing the mind inward and slowing the heartbeat. Sunlight filtered through the moving fabric, painting stripes of golden warmth across polished floors and tables. Shadows shifted imperceptibly as the curtains fluttered, creating an ever-changing mosaic of light and dark, movement and stillness. Even ordinary objects, chairs, vases, and framed portraits, seemed to take part in this quiet dance, their surfaces catching fleeting light as the fabric moved above them. The gentle rustle of curtains carried faint scents from the garden outside. Roses, fresh grass, and the soft fragrance of warm earth. These aromas mingled with the soft, rhythmic movements of the fabric, creating an immersive sensory experience that made the house feel alive, yet calm, patient, and unhurried. Each gentle movement, each whisper of wind through open windows, seemed to slow time itself, encouraging family members to pause, breathe, and simply exist in the moment. Some family members lingered in their routines nearby, moving slowly and deliberately, almost in harmony with the curtain's subtle sway. A teacup might be lifted, a page gently turned, or a hand lightly rested on a windowsill, each action echoing the rhythm of the fluttering fabric. The room felt alive without urgency, filled with soft, hypnotic motion that invited contemplation and rest. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, the wind softened, and the rustling of curtains slowed. Light shifted gradually, shadows lengthened, and the house sank further into stillness. In the quiet embrace of swaying fabric, the mind softened, the body relaxed, and the gentle rhythm of the wind through open windows carried everyone closer to sleep. The curtains whispered their soft lullaby, wrapping the house in calm, serenity, and the slow, unhurried passage of unscheduled time. Through tall, wide windows, the family could see the quiet expanse of lakes beyond the gardens, their surfaces perfectly still, reflecting the sky above and the trees along their banks. Every rippleless inch of water mirrored clouds, branches, and sunlight, creating a tranquil scene that seemed untouched by time. It was a view that invited slow breathing, calm observation, and a soft, meditative attention to the subtle play of light and reflection. A family member rested on a window seat, elbows propped gently, chin cradled in hands, eyes following the mirrored movements of tree branches swaying softly in a lazy breeze. Each gentle sway was echoed in the water, doubling the calm, doubling the sense of serene stillness. Occasionally, a bird skimmed the surface, sending tiny concentric ripples outward, only to settle back into quiet, leaving the lake once more undisturbed. Sunlight filtered through leaves and over water, scattering patterns of gold and green across lawns and pathways. The quiet rhythm of life outside seemed to seep into the room. Branches swayed slowly, shadows shifted imperceptibly, and the soft murmur of wind through distant foliage blended with the faint ticking of clocks and the whisper of slippers on polished floors. Even inside, the household moved with a gentle, deliberate pace, echoing the calm mirrored world outside. Thoughts drifted naturally as eyes traced the reflections, meandering without purpose or urgency. One might notice the subtle curve of a branch, the way sunlight caught a ripple, or the quiet symmetry of the trees reflected in water. Each observation became part of the meditative rhythm, a slow mental exercise that required nothing but gentle attention, letting the mind wander freely while remaining tethered to the serene, unhurried scene outside. Occasionally, a family member adjusted their posture or shifted slightly on a cushioned seat, the faint creak of wood or rustle of fabric blending seamlessly with the soft, distant sounds of the garden. Time seemed to stretch in these moments. Minutes drifted lazily into one another, and the boundary between inside and outside blurred, creating a seamless sense of peace. As the afternoon waned, shadows along the water grew longer, the colors softened, and the mirrored lake and trees became an even more hypnotic presence. In the stillness of gazing outward, the family felt the slow ebb of the day, their minds quieting, bodies relaxing, and hearts sinking with the gentle rhythm of nature. And in this calm observation, the hypnotic tranquility of lakes and trees invited them effortlessly toward rest, sleep, and the gentle surrender to unhurried time. In the quiet of the afternoon, family members settled into their chairs, letting their hands rest gently on polished armrests. Fingers stretched lightly over carved wood or soft upholstery, motionless yet attentive, as if aware of the calm rhythm of the house. The stillness of hands, resting without tension, became part of the broader quiet, a subtle reminder that not all activity required movement. Sometimes, the simple act of being still was enough. The sunlight streaming through tall windows highlighted the curves and angles of hands, casting delicate shadows across armrests and floors. Each hand, poised and relaxed, seemed almost sculptural in the light, a soft contrast to the slowly shifting patterns on the walls. No one stirred abruptly. Every breath, every blink, every tiny adjustment of posture was deliberate, careful, and perfectly in sync with the house's measured pace. The room was filled with gentle background rhythms, the distant ticking of clocks, the faint creak of a chair shifting slightly, the whisper of curtains swaying in a breeze. Against this backdrop, the still hands on armrests were anchors, silent witnesses to the passing of unscheduled hours. They were motionless yet attentive, part of the hypnotic cadence of quiet observation, of time stretched thin and slow. Family members occasionally shifted slightly, enough to ease stiffness, yet even these motions were minimal, small acknowledgments of presence rather than bursts of activity. Hands rested lightly, knuckles brushing fabric or polished wood, thumbs occasionally flexing, yet the overall impression remained one of complete stillness and calm. The motionless hands seemed to invite the mind to mirror them, to slow, soften, and rest in harmony with the body's gentle repose. Outside, sunlight moved gradually across the gardens, highlighting leaves, petals, and fountains in a slow, unhurried dance. Inside, the calm extended further, eyes followed the slow shifting of shadows, thoughts drifted softly, and the quiet stillness of hands on armrests provided a meditative rhythm, a steady anchor in the flowing passage of time. Even in silence, the room seemed to pulse gently with awareness, carrying the warmth and calm of uninterrupted presence. By late afternoon, the family had fully embraced the quiet of motionless hands. The simple act of resting, of allowing weight to settle naturally, of surrendering small muscles to gentle support, became a ritual of ease. Minds softened, shoulders relaxed, and the hypnotic stillness spread from hands to body to the senses themselves. In this slow, deliberate quiet, motionless hands on armrests became a gentle guide toward relaxation and sleep, an invitation to drift effortlessly into the soothing rhythm of unscheduled, tranquil time. In the quiet drawing rooms, voices rose softly, drifting lazily through the space. Family members spoke in gentle tones, exchanging words about nothing of consequence, observations about sunlight shifting across floors, the slow flutter of curtains, or the faint scent of roses drifting from distant gardens. The conversation was calm, unhurried, meandering, and entirely without urgency, as if time itself had slowed to accommodate the peaceful rhythm of idle speech. A chair creaked slightly as someone shifted, and a soft chuckle escaped in response to a small remark. Nothing funny, nothing extraordinary, just a quiet acknowledgement of shared presence. The conversation circled gently, looping back to earlier comments, revisiting small details, pausing for long stretches of silence before resuming. Words were soft and deliberate, spoken in measured cadence, each syllable contributing to the hypnotic rhythm of the household. Outside, the garden remained still, yet its subtle movements, the sway of branches, the glint of sunlight on fountains, seemed to mirror the ebb and flow of these conversations. The room itself seemed attuned to these gentle exchanges, the air heavy with calm, soft light painting patterns across floors, walls, and furniture. Even the faint ticking of distant clocks harmonized with the unhurried cadence of voices, creating a layered symphony of sound that encouraged relaxation. Occasionally, a comment would drift into reflection, a thought about a painting, a recollection of a quiet morning, or an observation of sunlight warming polished floors. The discussions never moved toward conclusion or action, they existed purely in the moment, a meditative dance of words that allowed the mind to wander freely. Listening became as important as speaking, and silence became part of the conversation itself, a gentle pause that added to the hypnotic calm. Even empty rooms felt fuller in the company of these silent figures. Corridors, long and polished, were lined with paintings that seemed to watch over all without intrusion, their smiles softening the echo of footsteps, the hush of shuffling slippers, and the gentle sigh of chairs. Each frame became a small anchor in the hypnotic rhythm of the day, a visual lullaby that soothed the mind and invited reflection. By evening, shadows lengthened across the walls, stretching the faces in subtle, gentle patterns. The portraits remained still, yet their smiles seemed to deepen in quiet approval, a reminder of continuity, presence, and calm. In their silent observation, the family discovered a profound serenity, a hypnotic reassurance that the slow, unhurried passage of time was enough. Minds softened, bodies relaxed, and the quiet company of portraits smiling without saying a word became an invisible guide toward rest, peace, and sleep. The velvet rooms of the house settled into a gentle stillness as the afternoon waned. Rich, deep drapes absorbed the remaining sunlight, softening its glow into a warm, muted illumination that brushed walls, furniture, and the polished floors with quiet grace. The atmosphere was calm and unhurried, a perfect pause between the fading energy of day and the slow, deliberate rhythm of evening. Family members lingered in these rooms, seated in plush chairs or reclining on soft settees, letting their bodies sink into the generous cushions. The air was scented faintly with polished wood, old fabrics, and the subtle hints of roses drifting in from the gardens outside. Every detail. The soft rustle of curtains, the gentle clink of a teacup, the muted tick of distant clocks, contributed to the hypnotic tranquility of waiting. Outside, the sky softened into pastel tones as the sun prepared to sink behind distant trees. Shadows lengthened and merged into the corners of the rooms, creating dark, velvety pools that contrasted with the remaining light. Inside, the family watched and waited without hurry, their eyes tracing the gentle transition from day to dusk, a slow, immersive process that invited patience and quiet reflection. The velvet rooms seemed to embrace the waiting, their textures absorbing sound and light, creating a cocoon of calm. Even minor movements, a hand adjusting a pillow, a foot shifting slightly, were softened, barely audible against the hushed ambience. The family allowed their thoughts to drift lazily, floating like dust motes in the golden light, untethered and free from the demands of schedules or obligations. In this quiet interval, the day's small rituals, passing of tea, soft conversation, glances towards sunlit windows, blended seamlessly into a slower, more meditative rhythm. The waiting itself became the activity, a gentle awareness of presence, space, and time. Every inhale and exhale, every blink and soft sigh, became part of the ambient calm, reinforcing the hypnotic tranquility that enveloped the rooms. As dusk finally deepened, the velvet room shifted from soft gold to muted amber, and then into the gentle, forgiving shadows of evening. The family felt the weight of the day release slowly from their bodies, a relaxation that began in muscles and spread to thoughts. Waiting for dusk had become a quiet ritual of patience, an invitation to observe, feel, and surrender. In this serene, unhurried space, the mind softened, the body eased, and the hypnotic calm of velvet rooms guided everyone naturally toward rest, peace, and the gentle approach of sleep. As twilight settled over the estate, the soft peal of evening chimes echoed across the silent gardens. The sound drifted slowly through open windows and along polished corridors, carrying a gentle, rhythmic cadence that seemed to measure time itself with patience and grace. Each note lingered in the cool air, resonating faintly against stone walls, marble floors, and the quiet hearts of those moving gently through the house. Family members paused to listen, letting the chimes mark the transition from day to evening. The sound was never urgent or commanding, it was calm, melodic, almost hypnotic in its regularity. Windows caught the faint, amber glow of the fading sun, and shadows lengthened across garden paths, blending with the music of the bells to create a serene, contemplative atmosphere. The gardens themselves were still. Trees swayed ever so slightly in the evening breeze, fountains whispered faintly, and flowers, brushing lightly against wrought iron railings, released their subtle scents into the cooling air. The chimes moved through this quiet tableau like a gentle pulse, bridging the calm indoors with the stillness outside. Each note seemed to stretch time, inviting long, slow breaths and a soft awareness of the serene moment. Inside the house, the sound mingled with familiar, quiet rhythms. The shuffle of slippers, the occasional sigh, the faint rustle of curtains in a soft draft. Conversations had grown even slower, voices reduced to gentle murmurs that rose and fell like waves in harmony with the tolling bells. Even the most mundane movements, turning a page, adjusting a cushion, stretching a hand, seemed drawn into the same deliberate, measured cadence as the chimes outside. A child leaned against a windowsill, eyes tracing the garden paths illuminated by the faint glow of twilight, listening to the distant chimes and letting their mind drift lazily. The notes carried a quiet reassurance, a gentle signal that the day was ending without hurry, that the evening would unfold in soft, unhurried sequences, and that all was as it should be. By the time the final chimes faded, the gardens had been rendered even more tranquil, the house quieter still. The echoes lingered in memory, a subtle hum of calm, and the family felt themselves sinking gently into the hypnotic pace of evening. In the embrace of silent gardens and fading bells, minds softened, muscles relaxed, and the rhythmic, soothing presence of evening chimes guided everyone naturally toward rest, serenity, and the quiet approach of sleep. In the quiet of the evening, faint notes drifted from distant pianos, carried gently through hallways, open doors, and the still air of the house. The music was soft, deliberate, and unhurried, a series of simple melodies that seemed to stretch time with each lingering chord. It moved through the rooms like a slow, flowing river, weaving between polished floors, plush furniture, and the shadows lengthening along the walls. A family member paused in their path, letting the gentle harmonies fill the senses. Each note was clear yet delicate, a soft echo that faded gradually, leaving a quiet space for reflection. The music was not urgent, not demanding attention. It existed simply to accompany the calm of the evening, to enhance the hypnotic rhythm of unscheduled hours, and to blend seamlessly with the subtle sounds of the household. The air was scented faintly with roses from the gardens, mingling with the warmth of polished wood and soft fabrics. The piano's quiet melodies seemed to dance with these scents, a sensory layering that invited the mind to drift, the body to relax, and the attention to settle on gentle observation. Hands rested on armrests, eyes traced patterns of light and shadow, and even footsteps slowed to match the unhurried cadence of the music. Outside, the evening breeze rustled leaves in slow harmony with the soft piano notes. The faint clink of distant teacups, the subtle shuffle of slippers, and the quiet sigh of chairs adjusted for comfort became part of the composition, a layered symphony of gentle domesticity. Every sound, every shadow, every small motion in the house seemed absorbed into the slow, deliberate unfolding of melody and calm. The music shifted gradually, moving from one simple phrase to another, each note carrying a subtle warmth, a tiny pulse of life. Family members let their thoughts wander freely, drifting with the rising and falling of harmonies, the gentle sway of curtains, and the flickering of sunlight fading into evening glow. Even the quietest details, the sheen of a polished floor, the faint movement of fabric, the subtle scent of flowers, were amplified by the meditative presence of distant piano music. By nightfall, the final notes faded into silence, leaving only memory and the lingering sense of calm. The house, bathed in shadows and soft reflections of lamplight, seemed to exhale with relief. Minds softened, muscles relaxed, and the hypnotic presence of soft music from distant pianos guided everyone gently toward rest. In this serene ambience, the household surrendered to the slow, soothing rhythm of evening, letting sleep approach naturally, quietly, and without hurry. As the day surrendered to evening, nightfall crept gradually over the house, its soft darkness stretching across the polished marble steps of grand staircases. Each step reflected the dimming light in muted, golden tones, capturing the subtle warmth of fading sunlight and the cool shadows of approaching night. The marble was smooth beneath careful footsteps, cool yet comforting, inviting slow movement and deliberate pauses. A family member descended the stairs slowly, hand brushing along the carved banister, feeling its polished surface under fingertips. Each step produced a faint echo, a delicate note that lingered briefly in the tall hallways before dissolving into silence. There was no rush, no urgency, only the gentle rhythm of careful movement, synchronized with the hushed ambience of nightfall, creating a hypnotic cadence that guided the mind toward calm reflection. The house seemed to breathe with the fading day. Curtains swayed softly in the evening breeze, and distant lamps cast pools of warm light on the marble floors, accentuating their smooth, cool texture. Shadows lengthened and deepened, stretching across steps and walls, blending light and dark in slow, seamless transitions. Even the faint scent of polished wood and lingering roses from the gardens became more pronounced in the quiet, accentuating the serene atmosphere. Elsewhere, the household moved with deliberate calm. Slippers shuffled softly across carpets, chairs sighed gently under the weight of still bodies, and hands rested lightly on armrests or polished railings. Each motion, however slight, echoed faintly against the marble, harmonizing with the slow encroachment of night. The faint ticking of clocks and the occasional rustle of fabric became part of the rhythmic, meditative cadence of the evening. Family members paused occasionally on the steps, letting the stillness wash over them. Eyes traced the gentle lines of marble, banisters, and shadows, following the faint reflections of lamplight that danced across each surface. The slow descent of nightfall encouraged patience, a deliberate awareness of each step, each breath, each heartbeat. It invited a soft surrender to the unhurried pace of the evening, a meditative alignment of body, mind, and surroundings. By the time darkness settled fully over the house, the marble steps glimmered faintly under the glow of lamps and candlelight, the coolness of the stone balanced by the warmth of the surroundings. The hypnotic rhythm of careful steps, gentle shadows, and soft echoes invited the family to release tension, to relax fully, and to drift toward sleep. Nightfall falling slowly on marble steps became not just a transition from day to night, but a calming guide into serene, undisturbed rest. As night deepened, candles were lit throughout the house, their gentle flames flickering softly in polished holders. The warm glow spread across tables, walls, and furniture, casting long, slow-moving shadows that stretched languidly along corridors and rooms. Each flame seemed to breathe, tilting subtly in the faint draft, reflecting off brass and glass, and creating a quiet, hypnotic rhythm that filled the house with calm. Family members moved deliberately, replacing candles in holders that had burned low, adjusting wicks and trimming threads with soft, careful motions. Each action was slow, measured, and filled with quiet reverence, as if tending the light itself were part of the unhurried meditation of the evening. The soft clink of brass and the faint hiss of trimmed wicks blended seamlessly into the ambient sounds of the house. The occasional shuffle of slippers, the subtle sigh of chairs, the distant echo of footsteps on polished floors. The shadows cast by the candlelight stretched long across rugs, marble steps, and tapestries, merging with the deepening night to create a pattern that seemed to move imperceptibly with every flicker. Even the smallest motions, a hand resting on a banister, a page turning in a book, altered the dance of light and shadow, reinforcing the hypnotic, meditative quality of the evening. The long shadows were not ominous, they were gentle, flowing companions to the stillness, guiding the mind and body toward calm reflection. Outside, the gardens were muted in the moonlight, distant fountains barely catching the glow of stars and candlelight. The soft murmur of water mingled with the flickering illumination inside, extending the calm beyond walls and windows. The interplay of light and darkness, of shadow and flame, created a sensory rhythm that encouraged slow, deliberate breathing, gentle awareness, and quiet surrender to the evening. Family members paused occasionally to admire the glow, their hands resting lightly, eyes following shadows as they stretched and contracted across walls and floors. There was no hurry, no urgency, only a deliberate, soothing immersion in light, shadow, and the gentle movements of the household. Each candle flame, each elongated shadow, each faint echo of soft motion contributed to a hypnotic atmosphere, lulling the mind into gentle stillness. By late night, the candles burned steadily, shadows long and serene, and the house seemed wrapped in a soft, calming embrace. In the warm flicker of light and the slow, stretching play of darkness, the family found a profound sense of rest. The simple act of replacing candles, and watching shadows stretch long across familiar rooms, became a quiet guide toward relaxation, serenity, and the gentle approach of sleep. As the household began to settle for the night, soft whispers floated through the empty halls, gentle goodnights exchanged between family members, spoken in hushed tones so as not to disturb the delicate calm. Each word was slow and deliberate, a quiet acknowledgement of presence, a soothing ritual that marked the transition from wakefulness to rest. The halls, lined with portraits and polished wood, seemed to absorb these soft utterances, carrying them like faint echoes along their length. Footsteps moved slowly as individuals returned to their rooms, slippers brushing lightly over carpets, floorboards creaking ever so subtly in rhythm with the whispers. The voices were calm, melodic even, carrying the warmth of care and the gentle reassurance that each person was seen and remembered before the quiet of night fully settled in. Even the briefest exchange, a murmur of "good night" or a soft smile, added to the hypnotic serenity of the house. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting long, silvered patterns along the floors, and shadows stretched and bent with the passing of figures and the gentle flicker of candlelight. The empty halls seemed larger in the quiet, yet not lonely. The whispered voices left traces of warmth and presence in their wake, a gentle guide for anyone moving slowly through the space. The sound of words mingled with the faint hum of distant clocks, the soft rustle of curtains, and the subtle movement of the house settling into night. Some family members paused mid-step, lingering near doorways or windows, letting the hushed conversations resonate in their minds. The echoes carried reassurance and comfort, a lullaby in spoken form, allowing the mind to soften, the body to release tension, and the rhythm of breath to slow. Each whispered goodnight became a bridge between consciousness and the gentle pull of sleep, a final acknowledgement of the day's calm before surrendering fully to night. By late evening, the halls were nearly silent, but traces of whispered goodnights lingered in the air. The quiet felt complete yet tender, a careful balance of presence and stillness. Family members settled into their rooms, doors closed softly behind them, leaving behind the faint, warm echo of care and familiarity. In the stillness of empty halls, hearts softened, minds eased, and the gentle rhythm of whispered goodnights guided everyone naturally toward rest, serenity, and the slow embrace of sleep. By the late hours of night, the house itself seemed to inhale and exhale, settling into a gentle rhythm of quiet sleep. Doors were closed softly, curtains drawn just enough to catch moonlight, and every room became a cocoon of calm. The polished floors, the thick carpets, the velvet chairs, and the cool marble steps all seemed to pause together, embracing the stillness of hours when no footsteps disturbed the silence. Family members lay quietly in their beds, bodies heavy and relaxed, minds slowing with each passing minute. The house, now emptied of activity, responded to their rest. The walls absorbed the faint sounds of slow breathing, the subtle shift of blankets, the gentle turning of heads in pillows, and the delicate creaks of settling wood. In this harmonious quiet, even the smallest noises became part of a soft, rhythmic pulse, a breathing pattern shared between building and inhabitants. A faint draft moved through open windows, brushing against curtains and stirring the fragrance of roses that had lingered since the afternoon. The wind whispered softly, blending with distant echoes of clocks and the gentle hum of empty rooms. In the stillness, the house seemed alive in a subdued, tender way, every room, hallway, and staircase attuned to the serene, unhurried cadence of nighttime rest. Somewhere in a corridor, a faint sigh of wood settling or the whisper of an old floorboard under gravity added to the hypnotic rhythm. Even the portraits on the walls, silent observers for generations, seemed to relax into the stillness, their eyes reflecting dim moonlight, their painted smiles soft and approving. The house and its inhabitants existed in a shared meditation, a slow, seamless dance of presence and quiet that required no movement, no sound, no purpose, only stillness and awareness. The deeper into the night, the slower the rhythm became. Each inhalation and exhalation, each faint creak or whisper, matched the relaxed heartbeat of the rooms themselves. The house seemed to breathe with intention, a guardian of calm, carrying the household gently toward dreams. Every corner, every shadow, every familiar surface contributed to a lullaby of stillness, an invisible comfort that cradled body and mind alike. In the quiet of the late night, moonlight spilled softly through tall windows, gliding across shiny tabletops with a gentle, silvery touch. The polished surfaces reflected the subtle glow, scattering faint patterns of light across the room. Each reflection shimmered slowly, bending with the slight movements of curtains and the soft flutter of a draft, creating a hypnotic play of light that seemed to stretch and linger in every corner. Family members moved quietly, careful not to disturb the calm. A hand might rest lightly on a tabletop, feeling the cool smoothness beneath fingertips, or a chair might be nudged gently back into place, producing a faint glint in the moonlight. The reflective surfaces became small mirrors of the night, capturing shadows, candlelight flickers, and slivers of moon, folding them back into the room in delicate, unhurried patterns. The house was otherwise still. Floors were polished and quiet, rugs absorbed the faintest sounds, and the distant hum of clocks blended seamlessly with the gentle shiver of light on tables. Even in motion, everything seemed slowed, as if the moonlight itself had softened the pace of the house, wrapping each object, each person, each shadow in an invisible, tranquil rhythm. Outside, the gardens were muted, and the fountains whispered faintly in the background. Their subtle sounds mingled with the moonlit reflections indoors, creating a layered, calming symphony. The tabletops, bare or adorned with small decorative items, reflected the serene glow, turning ordinary objects into mesmerizing, glimmering points of attention. Even the faint scent of roses drifting in from distant gardens seemed amplified under the lunar light, subtle and calming, filling the rooms with gentle presence. A family member paused beside one of the long tables, eyes tracing the soft gleam across its surface, letting their gaze wander across reflections of lamps, curtains, and distant windows. The mind slowed naturally, the body relaxed into the surrounding calm, and every small sound, the whisper of fabric, a distant creak, the faint shuffle of slippers, blended into the hypnotic, moonlit rhythm of the night. By the early hours, the moon had drifted higher, casting its serene light in steady streams across every polished surface. The house seemed to breathe with the silvery illumination, reflections shimmering softly, shadows deepening, and the quiet intimacy of the night wrapping everyone in a gentle embrace. Moonlight on shiny tabletops became a lullaby of light, guiding minds to stillness, bodies to calm, and the household toward the slow, restorative approach of sleep. As the house lay in deep night, silence settled over every room, stretching wide and unbroken. In this stillness, it almost seemed that dreams themselves had begun to wander, drifting softly through the vast corridors, across polished floors, and around high ceilings. They moved without urgency, floating over rugs, gliding past chairs, and brushing gently against walls, carrying a quiet, hypnotic energy that filled the empty spaces with calm. Family members slept peacefully, their breaths slow and steady, bodies sinking deeper into mattresses, armrests, or feathered sofas. Each room seemed attuned to their rest, amplifying the gentle rhythm of dreaming. Shadows lengthened and softened in the dim light of moon and candle, creating a sense of infinite depth, as if the very architecture of the house were expanding to accommodate the quiet wanderings of imagination. The faintest sounds. Whispers of curtains swaying, soft tickings of distant clocks, subtle rustles of leaves outside, seemed to guide the drifting dreams, like a delicate compass pointing toward serenity. Very door, hallway, and window became a passageway for the mind's quiet meanderings, allowing thought to drift freely while the body remained perfectly still. Soft moonlight pooled across floors and tabletops, illuminating corners that otherwise would have remained shadowed. Dreams passed over them like gentle reflections, flickering softly in rhythm with the night. Even the silent portraits lining the walls seemed to watch with approval, their painted eyes following the meandering currents of imagination, their faint smiles encouraging the mind to wander deeper into calm, restful thought. Every room seemed alive yet undemanding, carrying a subtle sense of guidance for the dreaming mind. Armchairs cradled sleepers, staircases waited patiently, and corridors held their echoes lightly, allowing thoughts to drift without interruption. The vastness of the house became a landscape for dreams to explore slowly, unhurriedly, with no sense of rush, no sense of urgency, only gentle observation and quiet curiosity. By the early hours, dreams had wandered through every room, touching each surface and corner, leaving traces of calm, serenity, and gentle thought in their wake. The house, deep in slumber itself, breathed softly around these nocturnal explorations, a companion to the wandering mind. Minds softened, bodies relaxed, and the hypnotic, meandering journey of dreams through vast rooms carried the household fully into sleep, rest, and the serene embrace of night. As dawn approached, the house lay in a final, perfect stillness, the quiet culmination of hours steeped in calm. Moonlight faded slowly, giving way to the soft, gentle glow of early morning as the first rays of sun tiptoed across polished floors, velvet drapes, and marble steps. Every object seemed to rest in quiet anticipation, as if the house itself had exhaled after a long night of patient observation. The rooms were empty of movement, yet filled with a lingering warmth, the faint scent of roses, the soft echoes of whispered goodnights, the reflections of moonlight still visible on tabletops. Chairs and armrests had returned to their undisturbed positions, slippers lay motionless by bedsides, and even the distant clocks ticked with a muted, measured patience. Everything was perfectly settled, awaiting the gentle stirrings of another idle morning. Family members slept in serene repose, their bodies heavy with rest, minds softened by the hypnotic rhythms of night. Outside, birds began their quiet song, and leaves rustled softly in the early breeze, heralding the slow, unhurried awakening of the gardens. The house remained a calm observer of this transition, its halls, corridors, and staircases embracing the gentle tension between sleep and the first hints of a new day. The sunlight filtered through tall windows, brushing across floors, illuminating familiar patterns and textures. Dust motes floated lazily in the beams, drifting as if in conversation with the empty rooms. The reflections on polished tabletops shimmered softly, merging the remnants of night with the tentative light of dawn. Even the portraits along the walls seemed to awaken subtly, their painted eyes catching the soft illumination, their silent smiles welcoming the approaching morning. There was no urgency, no disturbance, only the deliberate unfolding of the day in slow, measured increments. The house, steeped in tranquility, seemed to cradle the world within it, holding everything in suspended calm. Each detail, the rustle of curtains, the subtle scent of polished wood, the lingering warmth of the hearth, reminded the household that these idle moments were a gift, a time to linger in quiet reflection before activity resumed.